Etheria Restart has been on my radar for a while now, and with the full game's release on the 5th of June, I hopped in right away, with very little expectations, but to my surprise, the game mostly exceeded those expectations. However, the game has many flaws and is definitely not for everyone. Despite its flaws though, it has a lot going for it, and I think with the next few updates, this game can truly stand out and shine. But for now, let's get into the details to answer the question, should you play Etheria Restart? Well, let's restart the system and dive right into the review. The story has a pretty interesting start with a cool concept that draws you in right away, with great animations, cool tutorial elements, brilliant voice acting with nice pacing. It gets you right into the action and introduces you to the game's basic mechanics, and doesn't delay. However, as soon as I finished the prologue, I noticed a massive problem. The story is pretty boring. It has some good points, but after the intro, the pacing is really slow, the dialogue is drawn out, and the scenes feel stiff. And everything that drew me in originally was instantly thrown out of the window, and what I got instead was a mediocre plot with some interesting elements but awful execution. I have a few issues with the story presentation, but if I had to list my main complaints, then here we go. Firstly, the text is really small with an awful font that just makes reading dialogue hard at times. This could be fixed if they just made the font bolder or they changed the font entirely. Next is the pacing, it's pretty bad. Now, the chapters aren't actually too long themselves, but the dialogue is very drawn out, so it feels like each chapter goes on for way too long. And finally, the fact that the story is held back by an extremely aggressive time-gated system, where leveling up takes up too much time, meaning it could be a while before you can progress, which is not very beginner-friendly. However, much like Zenless, I believe this can and will change. However, the story isn't awful, it just needs to have a few adjustments for it to be at least a decent story for a gacha game, as there are some really great aspects like the voice acting, cutscenes, and a few other elements. But for now, the 1.0 story has failed to capture my interest. The combat is where this game stands out. It uses a turn-based system that's not all too in-depth itself. However, for a gacha game, the combat is brilliant. You have 3 action buttons in combat that actually do not require skill points, but instead refresh each turn. So some skills, after you use them, will need 3 turns to end in order for you to use it again, which is very different from HSR's SP system. You can also shorten the cooldown period with certain character abilities, which adds a lot of depth to the system. And what I like most about the combat is every single character has their own playstyle that feels unique and makes them very flexible. You can have many different types of variations of team comps, and what helps is the very different elements and combat roles that just make the game feel refreshing. They don't use the typical electro or cryo type elements, and characters aren't confined to a single role in combat, meaning you can create a character build that's truly unique for each character, adding a little bit of spice to your team comps. The combat itself, as I said earlier, is great. It can require a little bit of planning and strategy, and with flashy animations, quick combat that doesn't feel slow, especially with a 3x speed up. Honestly, I do believe this completely obliterates HSR's combat system. There's a lot of content in the game currently. There's multiple events ongoing, there's PvP and guild raids, many materials to farm, and a ton of difficult content to play through. Getting materials is efficient, as once you have beaten one instance, let's say of an XP domain, you can then have the option to AFK farm it using its stamina. You can consume up to 100 stamina at a time. This system uses auto battle, so you can go off and do something else, or you can even exit the battle and go do some other content in the game whilst that battle is ongoing, and then go claim your rewards after. PvP comes with 3 modes to choose from, and honestly it's super fun. However, it's very pay to win, which honestly is to be expected. However, you can still get quite far as a free-to-play player, which is surprising. And from what is currently out so far, the events are pretty fun. You have your usual combat events, but you also have this daily board game event, which comes with some actually great rewards. However, there's one really big issue. All of this content takes a very long time to unlock, and it has that same issue the story does, where you need to reach a certain level before you can unlock more content, which is fine, yet again, but the early game makes it really hard to efficiently level up your account, so progression feels very slow. However, a good thing about the stamina system is each time you level up you get 100 stamina refilled, and your max stamina goes up by once per level. So I assume this won't be a problem in the late game. Now for the big topic, is Etheria Restart free to play friendly? Absolutely yes for 90% of the content. The other pay to win 10% from what I can tell so far is the PvP, however not to a silly extent. During my first 5 days of playing the game, I've earned a total of 300 pulls, and those pulls are still going up with the amount of rewards that we get just for playing the game daily, which is insane. We are also getting multiple free SSRs and a bunch of free skins too, which really just proves that this game is highly rewarding. And also the codes on release gave you a total of 28 free pulls, which is absolutely insane. But if the devs dish out pulls like Mr. Beast, then surely the gacha system must be punishing and predatory, right? Thankfully, no. In fact, the gacha system is very free-to-play friendly. First of all, the standard banner will actually have limited characters added to it as more characters are released, which is something most gachas fail to do, which leads to an overflow of reruns. That will not be happening here. Secondly, there are no 50/50s and 0 weapon banners, so you do not need to worry about predatory systems that force you to spend your free-to-play currency and you have to miss certain banners. That will not be happening here either. And finally, getting multiple copies of a character is not overly important. Of course it will make your units improve, but it won't break the game. Two things I would like to add here as well is the sheer variety of characters we have in the game currently. We currently have 58 units on release, with 7 R ranks which are like 3-star characters, 26 SRs which are like 4 stars, and a whopping 25 SSRs which are your equivalent of 5 stars, all divided pretty fairly, with different combat roles and elements leading to many team options even in 1.0. We can also get the best healer in the game completely for free from the 7-day commission event, which is brilliant. And adding on to this, character designs are diverse and they look very unique and detailed. Even lower rarity characters stand out. Which leads into our next topic, character builds. I won't go into depth here, I just want to speak about how straightforward character builds are. Firstly, there's only 8 stats in the game, meaning you do not need to worry about trash stats or elemental pieces. Everything is laid out really well with a clean menu that gives you the information you need in a simple way. Of course this system will most likely evolve over time, but for now I'm enjoying the simplicity and the amount of build options I have for each character. Now, before we get to the final verdict, let's speak about the positives and negatives of Etheria Restart. Starting off with the positives, diverse character designs with multiple outfits already available, high amount of rewards and freebies for free-to-play players, extremely free-to-play gacha system with great rates and improvements, stellar Japanese and Chinese voice acting, great soundtrack with a variety of different types of tracks, unique and diverse enemy designs with multiple bosses and many challenges from day one, simplistic character building with loadouts already included day one, detailed character models, engaging combat with beautiful animations. Now for the negatives, mediocre story with awful pacing, though this will most likely improve, time-gated content which takes too much time to unlock, which would also lead to players losing interest early on. Again, this will most likely change in 1.1. Dialogue seems restrictive, with no voiced MC, with a bland, non-existent personality. PvP is still a tiny bit pay to win, however this could change in the future, and there is a feature that allows you to ban one of your opponent's units before a match starts, but this can still be exploited because they also ban your best unit as a free-to-play player, meaning you're just going to get absolutely shat on. There are adjustments that should be made, and I am excited for the future. So let's get into the final verdict. Etheria Restart is a welcome surprise in the gacha genre. Though it fails in a few big ways, especially with the story and progression, it did succeed in many other ways. It's a highly free-to-play game that rewards its players. However, it takes a lot of time investment to even get to the game's best content, so it's definitely not for everyone, but definitely worth a try. And with that being said, I'll be giving Etheria Restart a 75% on the rev meter, for standing out in a crowd of predatory and reprinted gacha games. If you like the video, then don't forget to like and subscribe. I appreciate any support, and if you have any feedback, then let me know in the comments, it really helps. And with that, I'll be seeing you in the next review. So thank you for watching.